So thank you for joining me today. We're talking about breaking the backup budget cycle on Nutanix with HYCU. So essentially, what we're talking about today is, the ways that HYCU can help you, save money, gain efficiencies, and kind of break that cycle of having to go and ask for more money, or you know, looking at those ways that we can potentially maybe even achieve cost savings in your organization by switching to HYCU or utilizing HYCU for other workloads as well. So my name is Chris Rogers. I'm a senior product marketing manager here at HYCU. I look after all of our hybrid cloud portfolio, which mainly includes Nutanix, but also our VMware, um, Azure Local, Zen Server, Hyper-V, so all the hypervisors and also our Dell relationships as well. So things like Data Domain and all those Power Max Power Store products as well. So let's take a look and kind of like what's driving the cost savings, what's driving IT decision makers this year. So the obvious one we can't go through without hearing it at least once an hour, especially in out the world we live in, right, is AI, right? So there's going to be large investments in AI and modernization across all of your organizations, right? That's something we can't really ignore. It takes a lot of money to kind of build this muscle and build this AI kind of a segment of our businesses and trying to understand where it can be used for and how it's going to be utilized and what the outcomes might be. But that all takes investment of time and money as well, which typically is going to be taken away from somewhere else in the organization, right? We can't just magic up some more money for IT. So normally it's going to have to be come from somewhere. So typically other places are going to be asked to do more with less, right? So that then feeds into our budget cuts and commercial pressures. We know there's issues in the economy, the geopolitical issues and all these types of things kind of weigh down on a lot of organizations. So people are always asked again to do more with less. We can't afford this year. We're going to have to push that project back and all those types of things. So when these things do happen, we need to try and find ways to save money and make sure the ROI and the TCOs all line up and make sure we've got a really valid business case for what we're trying to achieve. We all have this evolving compliance and unfortunately a horrible cyber landscape that we have to deal with, right? Compliance isn't getting any easier. In fact, far harder, especially in Europe, where I'm from in London, and we increasing pressures from government and other agencies and things like that to make sure our data is safe, it's not leaked, we can recover from cyber incidents. We're doing all the things we should be doing, but all of that takes time, money, effort, and resources, right? It's not just a thing that we can click a button and say, hey, compliance is achieved. These are things we have to work to over a period of time, which does take resources away from other projects as well. And now we have a more disparate, vast, and fragmented data estate than we ever have done before. If we go back 10, 15 years, everything was on premise, maybe in one SaaS app, maybe in one public cloud if you're an early adopter. But realistically, most things were inside our four walls. We kind of could see them, we had control over them. We couldn't go and buy applications on a credit card or cloud applications or cloud infrastructure and kind of run bills up that we didn't really understand. It was all pretty simple to understand. But now in today's world is very dynamic. Everything's paid, via credit cards or via purchase orders or via commitments, but we don't know how that's being burnt and how that's being spent. It's hard to keep track of, right? So budgets often get burnt before we can really use them for the value we need them for. And then we look at kind of like the risks of the do more with less, right? So like how do we look at that and go, okay, I understand I need to do more with less, but what would that really mean for me? What are the risks involved of doing that? So I think the first thing would be, the moving goalposts, right? So as I mentioned before, we've got that highly disparate modern data estate now. So we haven't just got virtual machines, right? Even in the Nutanix world, right? So we've got multiple data sets across Nutanix and even more of our infrastructure now. So we've got AI workloads, container workloads, VM workloads, file workloads, database workloads, all these things just sitting on Nutanix, right? But they don't just do one job, right? There's lots of things and lots of different ways we need to do that. We have to have scale and performance 24/7, right? We can't have we can shut it down at 6 o'clock and restart it again at 6 a.m., right? And we can do whatever we need to do. We can take backups overnight because no one's using those systems. Well, no, that's wrong, right? There is no out of hours anymore. As we all find, we're all working constantly. We've all got our phones with our emails and Slack and whatever else on. Those your customers and your businesses are doing the same thing, right? There is no out of hours. There isn't a time where we can say actually backups can run every night. It doesn't matter. The impact doesn't matter if they're slow. Doesn't matter if we kill the application because no one's using it. That doesn't happen anymore, right? And also the speed of production has vastly increased, right? With infrastructure as code, automation, orchestration, all these things. So we can build, infrastructure, VMs, files, containers, create data at a faster rate than ever before, right? And we need to make sure we can protect that at the same rate. Otherwise, we're kind of falling behind every day that something's created that we're not protecting. We're increasing risk and making sure that we can't meet our compliance requirements. And then we look at rising costs. So we've got an increase in storage and network consumptions. We've got minimal data efficiency potentially in backup, and everything has just gone up in price, right? So maybe your per terabyte costs or per gig or per whatever it might be, they're all going up. So we have to make sure we need to try and store more data than we ever before, and at the most expensive prices. How do we make sure that works out? That math typically wouldn't work out when we've got a lower budget, right? So as I said before, we have more data than we protect, that needs protecting than ever before. We're generating data at an exponential rate. And that is all adding business value. It's driving the AI engine, it's driving business intelligence, all these things, but it has to be protected, right? Backups can add a 4 to 5 times extra cost with no efficiencies, right? So if we're storing lots and lots of data with no efficiencies, no ways of gaining efficiency or data reduction in that data set, our production costs are X, and it could be 4 or 5 times whatever that might be just to store that in backup data. And in certain circumstances, we're going to explore a little bit later on, backup storage can actually cost more than production storage in some use cases, which is shocking, I know. But I lived through. I do a lot of talking to customers and clients, and depending on how you're using backups and what tools you're using, what storage and everything else you're using, it actually works out potentially more expensive to store the data on backup than it does in production, which is absolutely crazy. It shouldn't be the case. And then we have cyber threats. The biggest one that everyone is talking about, how do we make sure that we're compliant, and how to make sure we can recover from ransomware and the other malware threats that are out there, right? So typically we're going to need ransomware scanning, we're going to need anomaly detection, we're going to need something to tell us something's wrong, because we can't employ someone to manually go through all these things on a constant basis, right? Or keep our eye on the ball on everything. Eventually something will slip through the gaps, and that's where our scanning and anomaly detection is going to come in and help fortify that. And we now know that fast, clean, validated restore points are the best path to resolution. We know that that's the best way out of any ransomware situation. Paying isn't a great option for most organizations. Cyber insurance may cover some financial loss, but reputational damage and all these other things, or even just getting the data back isn't gonna solve that problem. And actually, with backups being the number one target for most attackers, backup security plays a huge role in the overall cybersecurity piece, right? We always spend tons and tons of money and tons of budget on protecting our production systems, and as we should, right? With AV and all the other things, XDR and all those types of things. But if we're not protecting our most valuable sets of data in our backup sets, then we're going to be at risk, because if something does happen in production, backups is that last line of defense. It is that way that we can make sure we bounce back quickly and bounce back effectively from any cyber incident. And this is what I've kind of looked at as the backup budget cycle. We have all of these things that draw from that backup budget, right? So we've got to continue backing up our current workloads. It's pretty obvious, and we can't just drop that. But guess what? As I said before, we're creating workloads, creating data, creating different things on different places on our existing platforms. So our existing Nutanix investments, for instance, we're creating more VMs, we're creating more files, we're creating more containers, we're creating more databases. So now we've got to back up those new workloads on existing platforms. That's then going to lead to additional backup storage. We're going to need more storage, more places to put the data. So guess what? That's going to increase the cost. And then we start looking at cyber, and we're going to need additional licenses for new features, new ransomware scanning. We're going to have to have different SKUs for different things for different products. And then guess what? As our data estate grows, we might need more staff to administer the platform, to look after the backup storage, even to do financial ops, right, on our cloud storage, wherever we're putting it. And then we start looking at, now I've got to look at my modern workloads. Where can I start looking? My legacy vendor doesn't support the newest workloads that I'm trying to utilize. So now we're having to investigate and explore new vendors to back up new workloads. And every few years, we've got hardware refresh cycles on backup storage potentially that we're putting on-prem. So now we have to figure out if we're going to invest in backup storage again, whether we're going to refresh that, whether we're going to push cloud, whether we're going to do anything else. And then, by the way, we're going to need more compute, because now we've got more workloads to test. We've got bigger tests to do, so we're going to need more compute required for testing those workloads in parallel as well. And guess what? It all goes round and round and round in a circle, right? Because this continuously happens. All these things continuously move. but our budget doesn't get any bigger. The slice of the pie doesn't increase. So what do we do is we need to create efficiencies in all of the places we possibly can to make sure all of these things can still be worked on and still be maintained, but without adding too much cost to the overall picture. So this is where we're going to see where Hive could potentially help you guys out. So the first thing we're going to look at is the reduce admin overhead. Um, I think this is kind of overlooked, and it's really hard to kind of put a figure on it because obviously everyone's going to be different. Every organization is going to have a different level of automation, different level of comfort with how many checks they have to do, and the reporting capabilities and all those types of things. But if we look at typically like what is a day-to-day backup admin or sysadmin kind of the teams that are looking after these systems have to go through, right? So this is my Nutanix backup checklist, which has been crossed out from VMware, right? Because typically we might have moved. So we've got to check proxies, check our agents. We've got to troubleshoot them. We've got to check for patches. We've got to start our backup jobs and set them up. Make sure our backup schedule meets our compliance requirements. And we've got to set up copies and replications. We've got to amend the schedules to make sure they don't clash and make sure the backups are completed before we're doing a replication. Because if it hasn't, then it's going to replicate old data. Make sure our backup security is top notch. Make sure we've got posture management and hardened appliances or hardened OSs. We've got to then check the backups to make sure they're successful, make sure they met all our SLAs, make sure the replication job's completed, make sure we've got configured malware scanning on those new SKUs we bought. We've got to ensure scanning doesn't impact our production or backup performance. So scanning has to be done at a different time to the job's been completing. We've got to then check the dashboards, deploy a reporting capability, complete those reports, manually test the workloads, RTO metric. And you can see this list goes on and on and on for all these areas that we have to do. Make sure our mutability is good, back up the use cases, make sure we're setting up our disaster recovery on a completely separate tool, for instance, analyze those new vendors as we spoke about, performance planning, capacity planning, and then looking at gaps in coverage. And then, by the way, let's repeat this all over again tomorrow or every week or every month. This list goes on and on and on and on. And it just can't continue in the way. The list just can't continue to get longer. Otherwise, we're going to run out of time, run out of people, run out of money. So how can we help you at HYCU, right? So we can help you achieve an instant ROI, right? So we have instant protection with zero learning curve. So if anyone's ever deployed HYCU or haven't even deployed HYCU, we deploy incredibly simply, incredibly easily. So no proxies, no agents, very simple, minimal infrastructure for Nutanix. One single hardened appliance, and that's you done. So we've had POCs set up in a matter of minutes, right? We deploy the appliance, power it on, connect it to Nutanix, and within minutes you can have backups running and being completed and successfully reported and all those types of things. So it's incredibly easy to set up, and you get that easy ROI. We have a very, very small learning curve. HYCU actually looks incredibly like Prism and Prism Central. So even the workflows and the way we've designed it is designed to look like Nutanix. So those Nutanix administrators can hop into HYCU and feel familiar and feel like it's just an extension of their Nutanix environment. We have an incredibly small footprint, right? So we don't siphon resources away from production to use for backup. We had, as I said before, no agents, no proxies. We have no hardware requirements. And that's the same for backup DR and cyber resilience, right? So we don't require you to buy any hardware. You may want to back up to put into backup storage. That's completely down to you, but there's no requirement from HYCU to purchase that. We give you ultimate visibility, so global visibility across your entire data estate and easy extensibility out into the tools you're already utilizing, right? So whether that be messages into Slack, into Teams, into ServiceNow, into wherever else you need it, without having to log constantly into HYCU and waste time. We can automatically send all that data, all that information, errors, alerts, whatever it might be, into the tools you guys are already utilizing. We've got automated SLA assurance, and we have a built-in reporting engine as well. So nothing to deploy, nothing additional on top, no extra SKUs, no extra licensing, no extra infrastructure. For our licensing engine, it's built into the platform, built into the appliance that you deploy. We'll go through SLA assurance in a little bit more detail, but essentially kind of knowing you're hitting your RPOs and RTOs gives you great peace of mind without having to do all the heavy lifting of getting that data like you typically would have to in the past. We can help you achieve that cyber resilience, right? We make it really, really easy because everything we do is policy driven, and that includes our cyber resilience story as well. So building out all these policies, and essentially you add one more policy to the list, and that's your cyber resilience policy. That's your scanning, that's your anomaly detection, all of that comes in a policy. So essentially add it, and away you go. There's no need to then configure it per workload or anything else like that. freedom made easy, right? Freedom of choice to move your workloads wherever you want, anywhere at any time. So that could be from moving from VMware to Nutanix, Hyper-V to Nutanix. You could even go from Nutanix into the cloud and back down again if you wanted to. So give you that extensibility, but your data, your choice, you take it wherever you need to, wherever you need to go. As I mentioned before, we're driving that efficiency through policies. So policy-driven backup, DR, cyber, and even more use cases like migrations as well. But by having everything policy-driven, once you've set up the policies, which takes a few moments, everything can be assigned automatically, everything can be automated, everything can be put into default or assigned based on tags or whatever else it might be. But that means no one's got to go and administer that. The policies are set up, the RPOs, the RTOs, all the replication jobs, the cyber, everything is built into the policy base. So once you've set that up, it really is set and forget. The workloads get automatically added to the policies you need, and they're going to meet the RPOs, the RTOs, the number of copies, the immutability, the ransomware scanning, the anomaly detection, all of that is taken care of because we've already set it up and said, this is what I want good to look like for this set of workloads. This is what I need for this set of workloads. This is what I need for this set of workloads. Once you set that up, it's set and forget, you're done. And we don't waste time with asking you to patch and secure everything, right? So we're secure out of the box. We have a pre-hardened Linux appliance. We're one of the only vendors, if not the only vendor, in the data protection world with a DISA as well. We have FIPS 140 and AIP common criteria, so you know that you have the highest level of security available on your hardened Linux appliance out of the box. You deploy it, and you don't have to patch it. You don't have to run Patch Tuesdays and update the OS and all those types of things. None of that needs to happen. Obviously, you need to update HYCU every now and again with the security updates and the new features and functions we release. But that's all bundled part of the same appliance. You don't have to worry about the OS separately to any other components. And then we're going to try and remove that backup fatigue for you. As I mentioned, 100% policy driven. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. What does that really mean? So there's no schedules, no jobs. We remove that management overhead. So essentially, once you assign a workload to a policy and you say, hey, I need it to back up every 4 hours, I need my RTO to be 1 hour, right? HYCU takes that, intelligently understands what you need, and then says, no problem, I'll make sure that workload is backed up every 4 hours, and I'll make sure it can be recovered in 1 hour. And that might even be letting HYCU choose which storage you want to put it on. So you might have some cloud storage, you might have some faster storage on-prem, you might have some colder storage on-prem. We'll actively know where to place the workload depending on the speeds and feeds and the recovery times and everything else we have from the intelligence of the platform. So you can actually let us do capacity and performance planning as well, which is great. And then if anything does happen and suddenly that workload can't be recovered, we'll alert you and say, by the way, guys, this can't be recovered in 1 hour anymore. It's now 1 hour, 10 minutes. And you can make decisions based on that. And our policies, as I mentioned before, are singular. So you have a single policy that contains backup, archiving, anomaly detection, DR and replicas, data validation, instant recovery, copy jobs, ransomware scanning, you name it, everything is in that singular policy. So you don't have to worry about 3 or 4 different setups for the same workload to do scanning, to do validation, to do copy jobs, to do replicas, to do archives. All of that is built into the same policy. And you can assign a default policy as well if you want to. So any data that gets created gets assigned to default policy, so there's no workload gets left behind. Or alternatively, you can use tags. So as long as you're tagging your workloads, we're going to put them into the right policy based on the tags that you've assigned. This is what I kind of mentioned. We have no effort to protect Nutanix workloads. So as long as you're tagging them in Prism and Prism Central, we're going to automatically bring those in, and you don't have to do anything. An administrator doesn't need to worry about moving a workload or someone changing something or changing a VM name or whatever else might be, or creating new workloads, deleting, adding, all those types of things that happen with infrastructure as code, they're automatically taken care of. And we can help you identify applications running in those VMs as well. So we have a patented automated agentless discovery tool that goes into the workloads, looks at what running inside them, and reports that back into the dashboard for you. So even if you don't know as an admin what the database team are doing, right? They've built up 15 databases in the last day, and we don't know what they're running. Well, actually, HYCU is going to come in and say, oh, these 5 are running SQL, these 5 are running Oracle, and these 5 are running Postgres, for instance. And then you know how to protect those in the best way, right? You know you have a policy that when you add them, add the SQL, they truncate the logs for you, right? Perfect, great, no worries. But we don't do that for Postgres for whatever reason. We have a very simple deployment model and a super easy upgrade process that's actually just been made easier in the last few months as well. And then we have the alerting and reporting piece, which we'll come across in a little more detail later on. But essentially, the reporting is built in, visualizations, reporting, tables, everything else like that. We have predefined compliance reporting to make sure you're hitting your SLAs. As I mentioned earlier, instantly receive the information in real time wherever you need them. So in Slack, in Teams, in ServiceNow, wherever else you want to, using a webhook, push that data out to wherever you need to do it. So you don't have to live and breathe inside of the HYCU UI to see what's happening with your backups and your site resilience. As much as I love the HYCU UI, the less time people spend in it, the better for us, right? The better that means it's just working, it's happening, and everything's working as it should be. So the second piece I want to talk about is storage freedom and efficiencies, right? So we have two or three major ways of working, right? So typically there's going to be the vendor built hardware appliances on the market, right? So they have their own appliance. You store the data on the appliance, and the license is tied to the capacity or the feature functions you bought on the appliance, right? So we have agents potentially required because they don't have the integration that we do with Nutanix. It's going to be time-consuming implementation. We've got a rack, stack, power, cooling, all those types of things that happen. Typically, they don't have the ability to do a lot of things on the box itself. So scanning has to go out to a vendor-managed cloud, and they can cover most of the workloads in the organization. What happens here is you essentially get locked into that proprietary ecosystem, right? So it's a proprietary box. The only way you can expand it is by buying more of the boxes, right? That's what happens. It's a hardware limited scale, right? So some organizations might be a petabyte scale, right? And sometimes these organizations and these boxes don't go up that high. You have to then buy another separate stack, another way to manage and other things. They also have a double penalty for growth, right? So because your licensing is tied to your storage. So guess what? You want to store more, you want to protect more, you have to buy more licensing. And by the way, you have to buy more storage of their choice as well, right? So you can't say, I'm going to store this extra bit of data somewhere cheaper or somewhere else. No, it has to be stored on the appliance. And this is where we come into the comparable costs. Sometimes when you're looking at quotes for these appliances with all the SKUs bundled up and all the other things, it's actually more expensive than buying the Nutanix cluster itself. Which is absolutely mad when you think about it, right? Your production workloads are the ones that make you runny and all the things, and then you're essentially doubling your cost, or if not even more than double your costs, just to back it up and protect it, which seems absolutely crazy for me, right? And then you have the second model, which is the vendor provided cloud storage. Take your workloads and store it in a vendor managed cloud. Okay. Typically they're backed by the public cloud. So, you're adding additional third party risk because you're not just backing up to a third party, you're also utilizing another third party in a cloud, right? So you're even more removed from if you're backing up to your own cloud, your own tenancy. You do lose that control, right? You lose that sovereignty over your data because it's stored in someone else's tenancy inside of that provider. So you lose that sovereignty and that control over your data sets. There's a big network reliance and particularly bandwidth heavy workloads, so it might not be suitable for all organizations, right? I know some of them have like cache on-prem and all those types of things that help with faster recovery, but still immutability is a problem. Those caches typically aren't going to be immutable because guess what? They don't want to lock it down because it needs to change all the time. So we're in this kind of like halfway house, right? Of what we can and what we can't do. And also in cyber attack, right? The first thing that most organizations do is cut network. So then you've got a backup repository in the cloud up here, your infrastructure down here somewhere, and you've got your infrastructure team saying, hey, can you connect the network? I need to pull my backups down. And the cyber security teams or your red teams or tiger teams, whatever you want to call them, are saying, nope, we don't know what could be exfiltrated, so we're cutting network connectivity for the moment. And then you've got this battle between we need to get the apps back up and running because the users are complaining or the customers are complaining, but we don't want to exfiltrate any data, so we don't want to open the network out. So you've got this kind of paradigm of which one comes first. And then we have the HYCU way, right? So customer always contains control and sovereignty over their own data. So you can store your data in the cloud if you wish. Absolutely, you can. It's a great use case. We have lots of customers who are using Wasabi, Azure, AWS, GCP, you name it. We can support that in a customer-owned cloud. But it's not the only place they can store data, right? They can store data locally. They can also store it on customer-owned storage as well. So we give you the flexibility to do whatever you want and change it whenever you want as well. So if you went down the customer-owned storage, maybe you had an old piece of tin and you wanted to create an NFS share and you can store data there. Yeah, of course you can. Or you can upgrade and you can buy a Dell data domain. You could buy whatever else you wanted to store your data on premises. Absolutely, you can store that wherever you want. Then you can also take a secondary copy and take it out into the cloud as well. Or you can have a cloud only and store data in multiple clouds if you wanted to. So you could have a copy in Wasabi and in AWS, or Azure in AWS, or GCP in AWS, whatever combination you wish, you can choose that. I've given you flexibility and that choice, and something that you can change at any time. So if you believe that the strategy was right today and you wanted to push it into the cloud, and then a year down the line, you think actually these cloud costs are mounting up, or actually I'm not comfortable being sat in AWS now. I want to change that to Azure. I want to change it. I want to bring it back on-prem. You can absolutely do that, right? We give you the flexibility just to change it in an instant, repoint those backups to a different place, and away you go. You can then do that for cost optimization as well. Right? So some workloads you're not worried about getting back super quick, super fast. So you could potentially take those straight to cloud and have that slight bit of more latency for bringing data back down from the cloud. You could keep a copy on-prem and in the cloud for cost purposes. You could have your tier one apps sitting on super fast flash only appliances, right? And that's super quick. So you can kind of really do that without needing a landing zone to then push out an archive for cheaper storage as well. And we have a huge ecosystem. We deal with all the leading storage vendors, whether that's cloud, on premises, a hybrid between the two, you name it, we can pretty much back up to it. So that's including all utilizing your existing assets. You can then pivot away from your current strategy to a new strategy, or even adopt new technologies that comes along. Right, we have no idea what's going to happen in the next few years. Right, this is typically going to be a 2 to 5 year investment in backup. So, maybe in 3 years something amazing comes out. HYCU can support that straight away, and away we go. And suddenly you're taking advantage of the best possible situation. You haven't potentially invested in something that you can't move away from because you're locked in or tied in. And then moving on the theme of flexibility, this really comes with this hybrid multi-cloud kind of story that realistically is the go-to for most organizations now. So most organizations are going to have this hybrid multi-cloud offering. They're going to have lots of things on premise, right? So they're going to have AHV, NDB, files, NKP, volume groups, objects, you name it. Like they're going to have the whole suite of Nutanix products and potentially even more on premises as well. And we can help you back up and recover between clusters, between workloads, between on-premises environments, absolutely. But we can also help you push that into cloud object storage, or even out into NC2, or even native cloud workloads as well, if that's something your organization wants to take advantage of. And having that flexibility, having that ability to adjust, change strategies, and pivot really does give huge flexibility and huge benefits to organizations because they're not tied into a single place. That brings cost optimizations potentially later down the line as well. Because if suddenly, God forbid something happened to Nutanix, or something, the same thing that happened with VMware happens to something else, right? And suddenly the course change, or it doesn't, Nutanix doesn't fit your alignment anymore, right? You're not locked into that ecosystem. You can potentially just move away whenever you needed to. I don't think that's going to happen. We've been a partner with Nutanix for a long time, and they've been very, very, very good for a long, long time, and I'd imagine that's going to continue. But who knows what's going to happen in the future? What's going to happen with anything? Suddenly, your organization might drastically change and become a cloud first only, and so we're going to migrate all that data out to cloud. We can help you support that, right? And we look at our disaster recovery capabilities. We can recover within Nutanix environments and have disaster recovery within Nutanix, absolutely. But we have full automated disaster recovery into public cloud as well. So where potentially we're utilizing a completely disparate tool for our disaster recovery, we could potentially save a lot of costs, consolidate those tools into HYCU, and essentially we can recreate disaster recovery into public cloud without having the additional cost of a completely separate license, completely different cost model, storage, etc., all those things. As I mentioned here, full failback, full failover capabilities. We don't have any idle compute costs sat there running to be used 24/7 just in case you want to fail over. It's all on demand. We support all the major public clouds, and it's always going into a customer tenant. So we don't offer any compute, or we don't have a HYCU cloud that you run your workloads in. It's all completely controlled by the customer and where they want to push their workloads to. Right, we have MSPs that offer their own clouds that you can push workloads into if you wanted to, but again, in your tenancy inside those MSPs as well. And then we have this complete zero risk, drama-free mobility with HYCU. So moving those workloads for DR or even permanent purposes as well. So cross hypervisor, disaster recovery, lift and shift, modern cloud services. So we can support all those modern cloud services as well. So if you are starting to transform into a more modern workplace with PaaS and DBaaS, we can help you support those and even move those between cloud providers as well, even cross-regional recovery between cloud providers. And also cloud repatriation is a huge thing as well. Not being locked into a cloud provider and being able to come back down on premise if you wanted to. And application-centric migrations. So taking all applications and moving them there, taking just workloads out and putting them into the cloud. We give you that protection before, during, and after the migration. So it's not just a case of using a migration tool. If something goes wrong, we have all the checkpoints you can recover from, and then automatic protection once you land in the new place as well. And also complete license portability. So if you bought a HYCU license for Nutanix and you decide to move to Microsoft Azure or AWS or GCP, you can take your license with you, and those same workloads will be covered under the same license, no additional costs, nothing, a complete license portability. So hopefully this is all making sense to everybody. And I'm going a bit quick because I've got a lot of content to get through, and I want to make sure that we're getting through and we've got time for questions at the end. So I'm gonna keep going. I don't see any questions in the chat or anything, so I'm just gonna keep going for a bit. So simplifying compliance clarity. This one, I used to be a sysadmin. I used to look after backups back in the day. And this was the thing that I hated the most, right? Like, how do I know that things are working properly? How do I know that I can meet my business SLAs? How do I know I'm reporting the correct statistics? How are we missing any coverage? Am I missing workloads? Can I recover cleanly? Like, have I verified all the backups? Well, probably no. I've probably only verified 1 or 2% of them because I don't have time to manually click through and verify they're all working. Am I missing any coverage outside of the platforms that I know about? Or maybe if I don't know about them, then I can't protect them, right? So this is all boiling down to, knowledge is power, right? So if we know everything and can see everything easily and report on it easily, it's going to be far easier for us to make informed decisions and also not miss anything that might cost us compliance or might cost us from hitting our business SLAs as well. So the first piece I'm going to talk about is RTO assurance or SLA compliance, however we want to spin it. But essentially, it's knowing your RTO, right? So when I was doing backups, essentially the only way to know my RTO was to recover workloads and start the stopwatch and time it. Occasionally, the backup tool might tell me how long it took to recover, right? But I need to go through that process. And even if I scripted it, right, I probably scripted it for a subset of workloads I knew weren't super important or even test workloads. So I knew that I was getting, the same results and, looking good, right? Making sure that those workloads were okay. So I might have got some efficiency through automation, but actually I'm not sure the data was completely accurate. Maybe I wasn't testing all my environment. I was only testing a subset, right? Or even, those most critical VMs were never tested because it was too much of a risk just in case something happened. But inside of RTO assurance in HYCU, essentially we give you real-time data on what your RTO is going to be. So as we know, like cyber attacks are not exempt from business SLAs, right? It's still, hey, we've had an outage. That outage could be cyber attack. It could be someone pressing delete on the keyboard. It could be someone tripping over in the data center and pulling out cables. It could be any of those things. But guess what? Business SLAs still need to be met. Knowing how quickly you can recover is vital to planning, right? So if we're expecting all of our workloads to be back up in 15 minutes, I think realistically we can say to the business that's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen for every single one of our workloads across our 500 VMs that we can get all those back up and running in 15 minutes. So how do we plan and make sure that if something happens, we know which workloads recover first and which ones need to be on the faster storage or which ones are prioritized, right? So making sure that planning is in place. And as we mentioned before, the RTO values typically given or typically reported on aren't representative of real world recoveries, right? They're not going either, they're going to a different storage to go to different clusters or been done out of hours potentially, right? So the workloads on all the clusters and all those compute and the storage is less. So it's not going to be representative of real world values. But inside of HYCU, you can see here, we've got our backup every 1 day. And then the time since the last backup was 23 hours, 56 minutes. So, we're probably due a backup in the next 4 minutes here. And we've got our SLA set from the policy as recover within 5 hours. And these two metrics are set inside the policy. So inside of HYCU, you set what your RPO and your RTO needs to be. And then we tell you what's possible, right? So then we want to recover within 5 hours. And we're telling you that for this workload, the estimated time for recovery is 13 minutes. So we're meeting our SLAs. All of it's going to be green. When we go to our dashboards, everything's going to be reported on. We can do a complete compliance status for all of our virtual machines. We get a nice green tick you can see on the screen said, say, the SLAs that you've set for this workload, the RPO and the RTO, are being met. But this isn't just at the time of backup. This is on an ongoing basis. So let's say we back up on a Monday morning and everything's fine. Monday during the day, our SQL DBA decides to triple the size of a database, right, and dump loads of data into it, and we wanted to recover that within 30 minutes, right? But now it's going to take 45 minutes or an hour because we've tripled the size of the data, and unfortunately, data still it still relies on physics, right? We can't just speed things up just because we've got more data. It runs at the speed it runs at, right? So in real time, we're going to then report back to you, so back into whatever tool you want, or even back into the HYCU UI, and say, by the way, guys, you set 30-minute RTO for this. Now it's going to take you 45 minutes or an hour. Something's changed. Something's not right. We can no longer guarantee your RTO is going to be hit on this workload. So it's giving you that real time clarity and be able to continuously monitor that as well. And it's not, as I mentioned, not just at the time of the backup or at the time of the test. This is on an ongoing basis for all the workloads you've got under protection. As I mentioned before, knowledge is power. So instant reporting, instant alerting, really, really easy to do. So it's not, reporting isn't the most fun job. I think everyone can agree with that, but it's a necessary evil we have to do. And as long as we can make it easy and super quick and send it on a schedule and all those types of things, makes it easier and reduces the overall time as well to get that back up and running. And then we have understanding our weak spots, right? So we can't protect what we can't see, and we know that, right? And as IT's scope widens, right? So we're probably looking after Nutanix, but we're probably responsible for most backup, right? Because backup happens typically it started in the infrastructure world, so the infrastructure teams or the backup admins take control over application backups as well, or SaaS and cloud backups, right? But maybe they don't know about everything that's been running in the environment, right? So we don't understand where our gaps are, whether we're backing things up or not, what's even been implemented potentially. Maybe the infrastructure team or the backup team don't know what's being implemented in the business. Just because it gets bought, the identity team add it into SSO and away you go, right? Doesn't need to be involved in that. But that's where gaps happen, right? So we have a unique tool inside of Nutanix, inside of HYCU, sorry, called R-Graph. So essentially we connect into your identity provider. We automatically categorize everything we find. We then visualize all your apps in a directory and tell you what's protected and what's not. So we then add all your SaaS apps in. We look at unprotected applications. We tell you what's available from the vendor itself. So it has limited recovery. There's no customer backups, and we're not compliant to any of the 3-2-1 rules with the backups. So this helps you expose those unprotected applications and cloud and SaaS workloads that we know are out there, and we know our business are running cloud and SaaS. But how do we know how to protect them, right? How do we know what's built into the platforms that we're buying? How do we know what's been configured already? All of this is going to be able to scan that for you and tell you what's possible. So suddenly we can help you expose those gaps, understand our data risks, and really be set up for, to be compliant across all the bases, right? So we look at things like NIS2 and DORA and all those other regulations. It doesn't stop at virtual machines and infrastructure, right? It's all data across all platforms, whether that's SaaS or cloud. It's still under the same jurisdiction. Still needs to be protected properly. Still needs to be recoverable as well. And this is where we move into tool sprawl. This is the thing that everyone has it in organizations, right? You have a tool that this person's bought in, and then this person buys in one that kind of overlaps it a bit or does this thing. And we actually, this one's for modern workloads, so we need to use it for this one. This monitoring tool works better with this platform, so we need to bring this one in. We end up with all these tools that kind of overlap and kind of do similar jobs, or just have a slightly different use case, right? And suddenly we're paying for loads of different licensings, different operating models, different storage places. All these things just leads to massive inefficiencies. So we know that our tech stack is more complex, right? We kind of know that. So we've had the hybrid cloud, or we've still got hybrid cloud. We're going from VMware to Nutanix. Typically that's a very, very fast flowing rate at the moment. And then people might have lifted and shifted into public clouds with some workloads as well. And then we've refactored or built new applications in cloud native world. And then we've also bought applications as software as a service, right? And you'd be amazed to know. So if you haven't, I don't think I've got a link to it. Maybe if my esteemed colleague on the chat might be able to add the SaaS MarketScape that we've done recently into the chat so people can find that. I forgot to add it to my slide. Sorry. On average, there's 217 SaaS applications in the average or mid-sized organization. I'd imagine if I asked most of you on the call to put the number in what you actually thought, it'd probably be less than double digits, right? Thank you, my esteemed colleague, for putting that into the chat. So, yeah. Um, so there's probably going to be lots and lots of workloads that you didn't even think about needed protection. When you start looking at it, you've got Microsoft 365, Entra, Okta, Box, GitHub, GitLab, Jira, all these things, like Salesforce, all these components start adding up. And then you start looking at things like the actual VPCs where we're running, or Route 53, or EBS volumes, or all these other places that we're storing data and storing critical configuration, all needs to be protected as well, because we're not running it because we want to, we're running it because it means something to our organization. And without it, it wouldn't run as well. So this is where HYCU comes in. This is where we really, really shine. Like, we're amazing in Nutanix. We are number one data protection leader in Nutanix and Nutanix workloads. We have the biggest coverage across all Nutanix workloads, but we also have the biggest coverage across any backup provider for any workloads. So when you're starting to look at it, we have over 90 integrations. I think it might be up to 93, 94 at last count. But that includes Nutanix, Dell, VMware, Pure Storage, NetApp, all these things for on-premises. Then we start moving into, we support all three public clouds and pretty much all of their data sets as well. So Azure, AWS, GCP. We definitely have the biggest cover in GCP and AWS as well. And Azure, we're getting there really, really quickly with all those workloads as well. And then absolutely SaaS, and in the link that my colleagues provide in there, you can see we've actually been named as the leader in SaaS data protection. And we've actually kind of beat organizations that only do SaaS data protection. That's all they do in their business is SaaS data protection. We beat those guys out, and we can do all of the public clouds and all of the infrastructure pieces as well for you. So this is a really powerful story. This is probably the biggest way that we can kind of achieve efficiency, save money, beat that budget cycle, is by consolidating workloads onto a single platform, a single interface, a single place, a single solution, single storage place. All these things can drive massive efficiencies in deployment, in operational efficiencies, in licensing efficiencies. All these things come into it. So suddenly you can consolidate onto HYCU, the R-Cloud platform, and you have total visibility, total protection, total recovery, and also total freedom across all of these workloads. And when you start looking at even more modern workloads, right? So we're looking at things like vector databases. We always support vector databases, Pinecone, Redis, AlloyDB. We've got a patented Google BigQuery data protection out there as well. So all these modern workloads and AI workloads we're already covering as well. So we're starting to look at this world where we can protect even physical machines that are still legacy up into your hybrid cloud in Nutanix, all the way through to public clouds, into SaaS, and even to new AI ML workloads as well. So we've got the whole breadth of the portfolio covered. And everyone wants things to be more simple, right? So if I can log into one place and have one vendor to deal with for all of these workloads, one place to go, one support experience, one licensing, one commercial arrangement, all these things make sense, right? So you have this one solution for every workload, right? So all of these things you can see on the screen. So saving time and effort, we save that research stage, right? When going through POCs and sales vendors calls and going to the trade shows and pick up leaflets and all those things, where we save that because you know that HYCU is going to have you covered. We've got that single simple experience across the hybrid and SaaS and cloud workloads. Global visibility across all your entire data estate. So in the same view, you can see Nutanix, you could see your AWS estate, your GCP estate, and your SaaS application status as well. You can utilize any storage you wish across all of these. Doesn't matter to us. Any storage we support, you can support all of the workloads and push it wherever you want it to. And as I said before, we do have the biggest coverage with 90 plus integrations across all vendors in the backup and data recovery space. So it's really start to think about all the places that you think you have data, and probably places you may be underprotected at the moment, or the 2, 3, 4, 5 vendors you have to cover, one for GCP, one for AWS, one for Nutanix, one for a SaaS workload. All these things start to, add complexity, add cost to the life cycle. So if we can reduce that, it's only going to help you guys save money and then go through that budget cycle again easier. And then just to kind of top up here, I'll put that in the corner here. So the HYCU named the leader, as I mentioned, is in the SaaS data protection. So we're top right. We're top right for a reason there. So we can save you time and resources by radically simplifying those operations. So, that big checklist we saw earlier in the presentation, we can reduce that down massively by kind of driving that efficiency and driving that policy-based operation. unlock storage freedom, gain efficiencies, right? So, we team up with Dell and Data Domain, and we see huge value for customers landing data on Data Domain. We're seeing potentially like 15, 20, 40, 50 to 1 data reduction in certain workloads by placing the data onto Data Domain. And that includes things like 365, cloud, and SaaS workloads as well. With a Data Domain virtual edition in the cloud, we see a huge return on investment and a massive TCO comparison compared to straight to object or straight to other vendors as well. Avoid a lock-in and experience that ultimate freedom, giving you the ability to move your workloads wherever that might be. And that might be a cost optimization conversation, right? But these workloads are really expensive running in Azure. We're going to bring those back down to Nutanix, whatever it might be. Minimize time spent on compliance and SLAs, right? They can tell you when your RTOs are breached. We tell you when your RPOs are breached. We tell you when things aren't working. We tell you when things look anomalous. We tell you what happened in a ransomware scan. All of this available via webhook into the platforms and the tools you're already utilizing for monitoring and communications. And then the biggest one for me is consolidate and protect. Consolidate workloads, minimize complexity, minimize that kind of buying cycle, that research cycle, all of that place, and place all your workloads that you can on a single vendor, and that's going to simplify massively. So that's all we've got time for today. So it's just there's some next steps on the screen for you here. So we've got a solution brief, some data sheets here available for you, a cyber resilience checklist for Nutanix administrators, which is really good. Make sure you download that one, and then a HYCU demo request. So you can either do a free trial or you can hook in with one of our experts and kind of do a guided demo throughout the process to kind of understand exactly what we can do for your organization. I'm just going to check the chat. I don't think we've got anything in the chat. Can't see anything. I'll just check the questions. No questions so far. So if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat right now, or in the Q&A, whatever it might be. I'll wait a few more minutes and see where we go. But if no one has any questions, thank you for joining. I really appreciate your time and your attention. If you have any questions, you both find me on LinkedIn, Chris Rogers, HYCU, you'll be able to find that, or any of the other socials as well. Reach out to us, go onto the website, find us, contact us. Any questions, we'll be glad to answer them, even if you submit them later on as well. But I can't see any more questions coming through, so I'm going to end it there. I'll give everyone a few minutes back of their time. I appreciate your attention, appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much, everybody.